Next tonight, a remembrance service has been held for an islander who was deported from Jersey to concentration camps in mainland Europe during the occupation. His crime? Taking a German soldier's motorbike for a spin.
Well, after the camps were liberated, Frank Le Villio ended up working in Nottingham, where he had some family. But he died a year after being freed. But for decades, no one has known where he was buried until a historian found his grave last year.
Well, Frank's body was repatriated to the island last month, thanks to the help of undertakers, constables and relatives. And today his life was celebrated by those who've helped to bring him home.
Well, let's cross live now to our reporter Susan Ripoll, who was at today's service. And Susan, a poignant homecoming for Frank.
Yes, absolutely. It really was a beautiful and very moving service for Frank here at St Saviour's Church this morning. Lots of people travelled to be here at the service, a lot of those who've been involved in this incredible story. We heard from the man who discovered Frank's unmarked grave in Nottingham, and we also heard from Frank's cousin Stanley, who thanked all of those who've been involved in bringing him home to Jersey. Now, one of the prayers at the service this morning, remarkably, was the same prayer which was read at Frank's funeral in Nottingham all those decades ago. It really was a moving service indeed, but today was all about celebrating Frank's life and really those extraordinary 21 years. It all began on the 13th of September 1925, the day François René Julien Le Villio, or Frankie, came into the world. He was a cheeky chap, but tragedy came early to the young islander. His mother died in childbirth when he was just a toddler.
I often think of poor Frank. He lost his mum at 2 years old, which is very, very young. He didn't know his mother. His father, shortly after that, went to sea. He worked on the liners, I believe. That was before the occupation. He did return before the occupation started. And by that time, his children had been in Sacré-Cœur orphanage, the whole lot of them.
It was a hard beginning to his short life, not having that close parental guidance. When his father eventually returned to Jersey, he was brought home to be with his grandparents. The whole family lived together at number 10 Museum Street. There were 11 others there too, his aunts and uncles and cousin Stanley.
It was rather a large house, it had to be for the rest of the family. It also had 2 cottages in the backyard, and my parents, Frankie's aunt and uncle, we lived in one of the cottages along with myself and my 2 sisters. We often played out in the street amongst us and kicking a ball around, empty streets, no traffic, and we had a really good time there, and I have fond memories of 10 Museum Street.
Frank was a pupil at Vauxhall School, and when he left, he became an apprentice mechanic. His prized possession was his matchless motorbike, which, like many items during the occupation, was taken from him.
He lost his only love, as it were, and he really, really missed that bike. And I think one day he was just walking around the streets of Jersey and along with his friends, his mates, and I think they just came across this unattended German motorbike, and whether or not his mates provoked him to or dared him to have a ride on it, I don't know, but that's what he did. He jumped on this German motorbike and off he went. And of course he got noticed by German soldiers, and he was very shortly stopped in his tracks.
Frank was sent to jail in Jersey and ultimately deported, leaving behind his family and his home. He was first sent to Fresnes prison in France.
He just got carted from camp to camp to camp. He must have been carted to 3 different camps. And, you know, I often feel that it must have been a terrifying ordeal for him. He must have been petrified, didn't know where he was going.
He was also moved to Belfort in France, and then to Neuengamme concentration camp in Germany.
He was 18 years of age. He got pushed around from pillar to post, suffered long train journeys from camp to camp, unhygienic conditions, crowded carriages, lack of water for many hours on many occasions, and you know, I think he must have been petrified to find out what was going to happen to him.
He eventually ended up in Sandbossel concentration camp. Historians believe this remarkable footage to be of Frankie when British troops liberated the camp.
I discovered an interesting story at the last moment. It appears that a young boy was taken from his home in Jersey to be used by the Germans for forced labour.
This capture sheet was completed by the cameraman from the Army Film and Photographic Film Unit, recording details of what they were capturing. From his ordeal at the camps, he returned to some normality in Nottingham, working as a railway porter. But he contracted tuberculosis and died just a year later, on the 26th of September 1946. His family never knew where he'd been buried until a historian found his unmarked grave some 70 years later. And it was, of course, the discovery of that grave which then led to the year-long campaign to finally bring Frank home. Lots of people were involved, as we've said, undertakers here in Jersey and also in Nottingham, as well as the constables of St Saviour and St Helier. It was on the 9th of August this year that Frank was finally brought back to Jersey in the early hours of the morning. And of course, today we've now had this remembrance service for Frank. Well, someone who's done a huge amount of research into Frank, research which has actually helped us with the report that you've just seen there, is Dr. Gilly Carr from Cambridge University. What did that mean to you today, being here at the service?
Well, I wouldn't have missed it for the world, but it was so moving. There were several occasions where I had to reach for my hanky, but it was a really beautiful service. And the address given by the rector and by Stanley Keeler were very moving, very appropriate.
Stanley Keeler being the historian who found his unmarked grave in Nottingham. I mean, you've done a lot of research into the occupation. What is it about Frank's story that makes it so special?
I think the fact that he's being brought home to Jersey, because if we think about members of the Jersey 21 who are back in the island, only Maurice Gould's been brought back before. So it's a really important sign that the island is prepared to bring back its occupation heroes and to celebrate their life.
And just finally, very briefly, just that footage, that incredible footage, how did you find that?
I found it through, once I found from International Tracing Service records that Frankie had been in Sandbossel camp. I emailed the memory organisation there today, and they said that they had some video footage of him and that it was from the Imperial War Museum, so I got in touch with them, and lo and behold, there is Frankie Le Villio, larger than life, on film.
Gosh, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, of course, tomorrow will now be the final chapter of this incredible story for Frank. He'll be buried at Surville Cemetery near his family. It really has been quite a year for his family, but very special to have him back in Jersey, of course. And as his cousin Stanley said today at the service, welcome home, Frank. Rest in peace.
Absolutely. Susan, thank you very much indeed.